Okay, so chapters 7 and 8, and we are definitely moving deep into the story and are maybe starting to see what Ransom's purpose is on Perelandra. And if we don't know what it is, it's not what he thought it was going to be. So one way or the other, things changed pretty substantially within these two chapters. Now, chapter 6 ended kind of with the cliffhanger of the arrival of Professor Weston. So Weston, the inventor of the spacecraft, the world-class physicist who sort of started this whole process back in the first book. It was his invention that allowed transportation to Mars that wound up with Ransom being kidnapped and brought there, and everything that happened from then on has really been spearheaded by Weston's abilities. Weston, as a truly world-class intellect, solved some physical and scientific problems that no one ever had. And it was through almost his force of will that the craft was built, that the trip happened at all. So if you remember from the last book, those of us here probably do, but if you're watching online, there were two people kind of in cahoots with this trip to Malacandra from last book. That was Professor Weston and Divine. So it was pretty clear, both in the fact that they kidnapped Ransom and they really intended to either offer Ransom as a sacrifice or at the very least treat him like a slave as they were going back and forth to Malacandra to mine gold. That seems to be one of their big plans. We had kind of a binary look at evil or wickedness as embodied by those two antagonists, Weston and Divine. So if you recall, they were both kind of the bad guy. I mean, very clearly, with how they acted and what their motivations were. And they were definitely opposed to Ransom and opposed to everyone on Malacandra, including Oyarsa. But they were kind of a different sort of bad from each other. And they almost represented, I'm not going to say two halves of badness, but two very distinct positions within badness. Okay, so can anyone kind of summarize the two types of badness from Weston and Divine?
I think Weston's God was his own intellect.
Okay, Weston's God was his own intellect.
And Divine's God was himself. He was very greedy and selfish.
Yeah, Divine's God was himself greedy and selfish. Okay, good. Anything else?
Their attitude towards the people.
Attitude towards the people?
Was totally different.
Okay.
Divine tried to use the people, giving them gifts and whatever.
Right. Divine is trying to give the gifts to use them.
Greater.
Right.
Whereas Weston, his idea was anyone that would get in the way, he just killed them.
Right. If you got in the way of Weston, he would just murder you because there was a greater purpose. So there's a lot of ways that we can kind of separate the two and contrast them. I think that, something my mom said is sort of a pretty good way to branch out and then collect their idiosyncrasies under these two ways. And one was Weston was all about the greater purpose. For him, the greater purpose was humanity and its evolution, its achievement, and its survival. So Weston, through his amazing intellectual abilities, sort of stood as a paragon of human achievement. And he sort of felt the burden that it was up to him to make sure that humanity did not wither and die on Earth, but we would push further into the solar system or into the universe so that humanity would survive. and he was willing to do terrible things. He was even willing to sacrifice himself. There was a weird kind of nobility to Weston, that it wasn't him in particular that was so important, but it was humanity in general. And one of the things that I talked about at the time was asking if anybody had ever run across someone who seems to like humanity in abstract, but doesn't actually like people.
Yeah.
Divine was just like a silly, selfish, greedy, small man. Weston was a very great man. You know, a great in intellect, great in capability, great in his thoughts. Everything was massive and huge, but it wasn't good.
Science.
It was all science. It was all progress for the sake of progress.
Save the human race.
Save the human race. And he was constantly very condescending. He didn't speak so much as he lectured. Whereas Divine just seemed to be very petty. He was just in it for a quick buck. And they were both willing to do some terrible things, but there was something about those base motivations, a greater purpose in Weston and a very selfish purpose in Divine. But I think we saw some of the consequences of that near the end of the book, because basically all three of them, all of humanity embodied within those three earthlings, are kind of on trial in the end of the first book, with Oyarsa presiding over basically, you know, the case for humanity itself. And Divine is there for like a minute, and then he's just out. He has zero to offer. He's overwhelmed by the whole thing, and he gets a little blah, 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 and then he's just sort of done, because ultimately he's so small and petty, he really has nothing to offer at all. And yes, it's evil, but it's of the sort of evil that really the harm is to himself more than it is anybody else. And he winds up just being kind of swept to the side as inconsequential. When there is real debate about the nature of humanity, it's really about Ransom and it's about Weston. Ransom, who is a Christian, Ransom, who tries to lead a moral life, Ransom, who came to Malacandra obviously under bad reasons, I mean, not his own, but loved the people, loved the beings of Malacandra, and acknowledged the authority of Oyarsa, and was basically ready to say, go ahead and kill me, because humanity is so bent, humanity is so stained. If we run the risk of tainting this world, it would be better for you to just kill both of us, or all three of us. A self-sacrificial choice through the goodness and the obedience, the humility of Ransom, that's completely countered by Weston. And Weston is all about this greater purpose, and the greater purpose must prevail. Even if I die, more will come. He kind of, it's almost a threat. And interestingly enough, even Oyarsa acknowledges something very noble within Weston, but that it's very, very bent. It's very broken. It's very contrary to how God has designed. But the power in that gift is very significant. And if such a creature could be straightened instead of bent, there could be a wonderful and profound force for good. Ultimately, do you recall what Weston's kind of final stand of principle is? Confronted with the reality of the unfallen state of Malacandra and the obedience to Oyarsa and to Maleldil, God, necessary, versus the bent one, versus the Oyarsa of the silent planet of Earth, versus Lucifer. Remember, he says, well, he's the one who strives. Lucifer is the one who struggles. And even if he fails, he's trying. And that's the one for me. So if it comes down to it, if I have to choose, this is like Milton's Paradise Lost. better to reign in hell than serve in heaven. And that's really the decision of Weston. And so they all three of them are sent back to Earth. And now here, several chapters in, gosh, we're getting close to the halfway point. We are now back to just two Earthlings on this alien planet. Ransom, who we know, Christian, moral, a disciple of Christ, humble, trying to do and accomplish the will of Maleldil as he is being sent, but doesn't really understand. But there's not multiple pieces of badness here. There's just one. There's only one counter. There's only one foil. There's only one adversary. It's not divine. It's not selfishness. It's not pettiness. It's not greed. It's Weston. And as we spend certainly this first chapter in getting those two reacquainted, I think we're going to have plenty to talk about what it means for Weston in particular to be there. So, we start off 7. Ransom wakes up, and what does he discover upon waking up at the beginning of chapter 7 that's such a surprise to him?
He had been talking with the lady.
Yes. So Weston and the Green Lady have been deep in conversation, and it looks like for some time that he's been, he slept through it. And what's so shocking about that?
Weston speaks fluent Old Solar.
Weston now speaks fluent Old Solar. So, Ransom, as soon as he realizes that Weston is arriving, I think kind of felt like, well, I've got one advantage. I understand the language. And maybe that's why I was sent in the first place, because on Malacandra, I was exposed to this kind of universal language of the heavens, and I know it, and I can speak with whoever happens to be here. Weston, if you recall, did learn some, but it was like the most rudimentary, very small, very halting, very, almost condescending, sort of broken language. And, Ransom, who initially thought, I may be the one who's being sent to Perelandra because I know Old Solar. And once he sees Weston, it begins to dawn on him, I might have to do something about this. Has in mind, at least I have the advantage of the language. And what does he discover? There is no longer an advantage because Weston can speak just as well as he can.
It's not not full understanding, because the lady says that there are things that she can't understand that he's saying, or
sure. Now, so let's talk about this for a second. The lady says, you're saying things that I can't understand. Is that a linguistic issue? I don't think so.
No.
I think it's a conceptual issue. So remember the chapters before, there were things that Ransom would say, sometimes even very offhandedly, that he just didn't realize until it kind of dawned on him the true nature of the Green Lady and the true nature of the state of Perelandra. So very offhanded commentary by Ransom became either very confusing to her, or there was just almost no common ground to understand whatsoever. Little things like death. She has no concept. Even his blood, when he skins his knee, she's, very surprised and wants to try it. There is, as we have talked about, especially in the last chapter, the vision that we need to have in this, in this alien land. This is on Venus, a a new solar Garden of Eden, and she is Eve. She is Eve before she has been tempted. She is Eve before she has fallen. She is Eve who I think we are now going to see is at the point of facing that temptation for the first time. And the question will remain whether or not she will fall. So we now have a tempter. Who's the tempter? It's Weston. So even inadvertently, Ransom has almost tempted her a couple of times just by speaking as an earthling, speaking as someone who can't think in any other terms other than the sort of brokenness of humanity and creation that we just sort of live in. This is the sort of stuff where you ask the philosophical questions, does a fish know that it's wet? You know, if that is the medium in which you live and you know no other, you don't experience it. It just simply is. We don't think about the air around us, but we would if we were on another planet that had no air or had a different atmosphere or whatever it is. And maybe you don't think about the oxygen content of the air unless if you've ever been to a very high elevation. You don't see any difference, but for some reason you feel very different. So anyway, but Ransom is very mindful. As soon as he gets a sense that he might be saying or doing something that would be a problem to her, he tries to cut it right off. Well, that's not Weston's point of view. If anything, Weston seems the exact opposite. Weston wants her to consider all of these things that she doesn't understand. There are things even within our humanity that if we have experienced as negative or difficult, that we try to withhold from people who have not experienced that negativity or that difficulty, most especially children. You know, do children need to know some of the worst, most violent, most depraved, most frightening elements of contemporary life? We assume no. They'll learn it in time because you have to, but how about later when they're older, when they're more mature, or maybe when it's unavoidable? But if we can't avoid it, why would you want to burden them with that? Why would you want to spoil their innocence? And I will say that that's a very shifting concept. I am just old enough to recall my days, my afternoons, especially in the summer, were and be home when the street lights come on. You know, that's not what parents do today. Now, strangely enough, statistically, as far as the crime statistics are concerned, it's safer now than it was then by an enormous factor. But we don't feel that way, right? And so there is an element of trying to, protect children, but there's also an element of they are going to find out and win and trying to manage and mitigate that. So imagine though, someone like a child who doesn't ever have to know these things. Now the Green Lady is not a child, but she is an innocent. And an innocent in a way that even a human child cannot be. So what do you do and what do you say around such innocence with the knowledge that even though I have had to know and experience and feel these things, what if that other person doesn't ever have to? So, let's see, what are they actually talking about? I'm not sure we know.
Weston was saying things that she didn't understand.
Yeah, I don't think we actually got into the specifics, only that we've got a very different feel already. When she says, you know, this is almost, I'm growing too old too quickly, Ransom backs off. But we've already now started to see, without knowing exactly what they're talking about, that Weston is doing, he has a different tactic, which is to continue to press onward until she really has to disengage. So she wants to leave. And what's the big deal about leaving? Where are they right now? They're on the fixed land. You cannot stay there overnight. You cannot stay there overnight. We'll see later that Weston's been poking at that. So maybe it's the same thing. We don't know exactly, but it wouldn't surprise me that it has to do with that fixed land and this one rule. Now she's leaving, and initially Ransom tells her goodbye in a very final, almost poignant sense. Did you catch that? Like, it may be that you and I shall not meet soon again. Greet the king for me if you find him, and speak of me always to Malelville. I stay here. What is he doing here?
He's going to try to defuse Weston in some way. Protect her.
He is trying to protect her from Weston.
Yeah.
She is the innocent with a capital I, and he is not. And he is going to try to protect her. But what does this imply in his own mind? Him saying, I mean, that's goodbye. He said goodbye. He's saying, when he says we might not meet again soon, that is like, we might not meet in a mortal lifetime. Why? That's where I think he is. And this is not too off, because what's one of the first things that happens between Weston and Ransom once they're alone? What does Weston do? He pulls a gun on him.
Yes.
So Weston wasn't, I mean, Ransom's not making up these concerns. He is, but there's a resolve in him from the beginning. He seems to, okay, this must be why I'm here. And if it takes me fighting Weston to the death to protect the Green Lady, then I will be prepared to give my life. And from the beginning, we get a real strong sense of, uh-oh, maybe that's it. You know, so what happens first in their interaction? He didn't pull the gun immediately, but there's an interesting little interaction here to start off with. Accusations are made.
Oh, he accused Ransom of having relations.
Right.
So he was thinking, you know, that the lady really isn't innocent, you and she have been.
Well, that's right. And any sense of Ransom, any sense that you're trying to protect her is obviously a hypocritical lie, because here you are having your way with her. You just want her to yourself. And, you know, there's been no sense of that for Ransom. What's the easy and obvious justification for Weston's accusation? They're naked. They're naked. And, you know, on Earth, as a matter of fact, they wouldn't even be naked. They would be naked. Because
That's a different kind.
yeah, it's a very purposeful, you know, this is not like, you know, I came into your bathroom and you stepped out of the shower incidentally. Oh, you're naked. No, this is like you're on a deserted quote, quote, island holding another woman and neither of you have clothes on. That's naked, right? So under any other circumstance, it seems like Weston would be 100% justified in his critique and a 99.9% probability of being true. Except this isn't any circumstance. This is the Garden of Eden. This is the one circumstance where not only does nakedness hold no connotation, it's actually the most appropriate for the circumstances. And they have a little back and forth with that. So interestingly enough, a little bit of this discussion didn't go very far, but this can be connected back all the way to chapter 2, I think, where we have Ransom, who survives this encounter. We know that. And if you remember, he gets it, like other people start talking about stuff about the resurrection and about, well, you know, what kind of what the resurrection is so illogical because you're going to have genitals, but you're not going to use them, and isn't that going to be frustrating? And he starts talking about, you don't understand. It's like you're transsexual. Your identity is just, it's over, above, and beyond the concept of carnal pleasure. It's not that you can't do it and you're frustrated. It's like you don't even want to. You don't need to. And so we're getting a little bit of this right here, right? He is naked with this obviously beautiful woman. Every description has been just how startling and striking she is. And let's think about this for a second. There's a sense in genetics that as our genes get passed along, we're basically making, in one sense, copies of copies of copies. And if you've ever made a copy of a copy on a copy machine, you know it always gets a little blurrier every time. So what you have trouble reproducing, but what you want to is something as sharp and clear as the original. But there's always a little bit of degradation or a little bit of loss every time. So let's just toss out here for a second. What if, as Eve, her physicality is perfect? Whatever it means for the perfect specimen, she embodies it. I have to assume that means anatomically, biologically, all the sort of things that we would assume are beautiful or alluring or whatever it would be on Earth. But, you know, Ransom is like that. I can't even conceive of it. So, and I think we can believe it. And there's been no sense of that, either in his actions or in the thoughts that we've been privy to. But they finally kind of get past that without too long because it's clearly an impasse. But we've had a gun pulled, right? So with a sense that Ransom was going to try to prevent Weston pulls the gun. And maybe this is going to end right here and right now. I'm on the top of page 76.
76, yeah. Yeah.
But Weston puts the gun away. Okay, why? Why does it surprise you that he put the gun away?
Just his personality. I expected him to go on and be.
Right, with his greater purpose, if you're standing in my way, I simply eliminate you, because that's what I do. But he actually says, Weston, I mean, Ransom, you do me a great injustice. Why would Weston put the gun away and try to plead his case that he is neither a violent nor dangerous man?
He wants something.
He does want something. I believe that's true. So they have this little cooperative moment because they're going to get into it in a minute, but they have this sort of cooperative moment where he just says, please help me get my stuff on, ashore. And they do. And there's still like this funny vestige of earthly humanity where he's in like a pith helmet, I think, and like a little British explorer from the 19th century. And he's bringing camp ashore. He's making camp. Now, Ransom has now lived here for, 2 or 3 days, totally naked with no supplies at all. Clearly in this paradise, you don't need shoes and socks and cooking equipment. But, he dutifully brings it, builds camp, and Ransom helps. And there's this kind of weird camaraderie. that almost belies the fact that Weston pulled a gun a minute ago. But then they finally get the chance to talk, and this is going to be some of the most interesting and maybe difficult parts of the path of what we read. This is going to be the bulk, I think, of chapter 7, is Weston describing to Ransom his new perspective. Weston's got a new perspective on life, and it's changed everything. So the question is, what is that new perspective?
But he still thinks it's his job to save the human race.
It is his job to save the human race, sort of, because he's actually going to become even more abstract than that. So there is a section where after he's really talking for a good long time, he even says, even if humanity dies out, that's okay. Life as a whole, in whatever form it takes, will continue, because he still has a greater purpose. He's a man of greater purpose, but greater purpose has now shifted from humanity in specific to something else. What could be greater for Weston than humanity?
Was it the talk about spirits?
Spirit, yes. The last person, based on the last book, that you would expect to start talking about spiritual matters. You know, Weston seemed like the very kind of classical stereotype of a scientist, you know, a pure materialist philosophically. All that there is what we can see and taste and measure and control, and you know, just the material world is all that there is. That's all that's important. And because we must strive to survive, that means, you know, the evolution of the human race. That means interstellar travel. That means immortality must be achieved. But it's about like passing our genes on in perpetuity, because that's all. This material life and world is all that there is. So immortality simply means generation after generation must continue to be born and live. But now, Weston has changed. So he is still, again, I want to keep going back to the greater purpose. Fundamentally, he is a man of greater purpose, but the greater purpose has changed from humanity to a concept which he calls spirit. Well, gee, Ransom believes in spiritual things. And as a matter of fact, now through the El Deal, he has seen and encountered spiritual things. Well, they must be best buddies. And I think there is definitely an element of Weston trying to explain himself with an air of, you'll see we're on the same side.
Talking about force.
Okay, he's talking about a force. So there's the more he talks about spirit, the less personal it begins to seem. And Ransom catches that every time. And he pushes back each time to say stuff like, you know, let's see. Where are we? My dear Ransom, I understand you perfectly. I have no doubt that my phraseology will seem strange to you, perhaps even shocking. Early and revered associations may have put it out of power to recognize this in its new form, the very same truths which religion has so long preserved, which science is now last rediscovering. But whether you can see it or not, believe me, we are talking about exactly the same thing. Ransom has to say, I'm not sure that we are. Oh, of course we are. This is predicated by Ransom saying, I don't know much about what people call the religious view of life. You see, I'm a Christian. When what we mean by the Holy Ghost is not a blind, inarticulate, what is this word? Purposiveness. There's an abstraction to everything that Weston says. where it's so vague, he can say, yeah, it's what you believe too. It's just more than you realize. You're in his same kind of old condescending way. Imagine him telling Ransom, yes, I understand your very small, childish, concrete beliefs. You're not wrong in a sense. You're just ignorant of the larger whole.
Not evolved. enough.
You're not evolved enough. You are not, you've not been initiated into the deeper secrets like I have. So you've seen the edges and the outside, and you have proclaimed them to be specific and concrete. I don't blame you. You don't know better. I have gone on the inside, and I can see your little details are just a very, very small part of this larger, grander whole. And it sounds lovely.
The sentence that really got me is when he said, don't you worship God because he is pure spirit.
Aha. So we've got this element here of what should be overlap in their beliefs. And Ransom is open to finding common ground. And every now and again, Weston says something and Ransom's like, come on, man, just right there, write what you said. You don't have to take it this other direction. You're so close. Tell me that you mean what I want you to mean, what I hope you mean. And every time Weston, of course, veers. And that's an important one. So where are we? That one's worth kind of poking at for a little bit. Here we are. Basically, Weston now sees himself as a part of the will of this spirit. And his greater purpose is to fulfill that will. It's not even his own that he's interested in, but fulfilling the will of spirit, which he now sees equipped him to uniquely be in this place in this time. Spirit gave him the knowledge and ability to be the world's greatest physicist and to create the craft that took them to Malacandra and to start off this whole process that spirit will then use to further evolve humanity and life itself so that life might become spirit in its fullest and most complete sense. I am now a vessel, and I understand finally that I have been used by spirit to become spirit. And every time when Weston, Ransom seems to think very hopefully, and then Weston goes off the deep end. He's like, no, don't you understand? And then it becomes kind of a disagreement, and then Weston goes off again. And so that's where we get this Ransom being able to say, a thing might be a spirit and not good for you. Well, but I thought you agreed spirit was the good, the end of the whole person. I thought you religious people were all out for spirituality. What is the point of asceticism, fast and celibacies and all that? Didn't we agree that God is a spirit? Don't you worship him because he is pure spirit? Oh, good heavens, no, Ransom has to say. We worship him because he is wise and good. There's nothing especially fine about being a spirit. The devil is a spirit. Well, now Weston's got something to say about that. Weston has a lot to say about what he kind of dismissively categorizes as organized religion, religious views, superstitious views, everything that seems certainly limited, very limited in his estimation, if not archaic. And he tends to pull back from saying wrong. He tends to kind of always circle back to like, you just don't realize enough. It's the old adage about the blind men and an elephant, and the blind man says an elephant must be like a rope because he touched the tail, no, a blind man, no, an elephant's like a tree because he touched the leg, and no, it's like a snake that's touched the trunk. And Weston would say, yes, 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 I alone see the whole elephant. And you religious people have been so fixated on the one tiny piece that you think you understand. But I can reveal to you so much more. Now, he's got a little proof that he's not just making stuff up. What is the proof that Weston understands, knows, and has encountered the truth of spirit? It's not just an academic discussion. He's got some evidence, and it's pretty compelling.
Oh, it's his language ability.
How do you think I know how to speak Old Solar?
Yeah, he's learned it from.
I have been guided. So Weston has not learned Old Solar because he is familiar with the construction of languages, because he has been toiling over textbooks, or he got the Duolingo app on his smartphone. He has been gifted this ability supernaturally. He is now capable of doing something he could not do before through a power that is not his own, and with what seems to be instant ability. And this is where he is saying some awfully interesting things about being a vessel, being a conduit. Oh, sure. There's like imagine in a house, the wiring of a house, you've got, switches here and outlets there, and some outlets might have more amperage than others, but I have not plugged into a little 110 outlet with 20 amps. I have plugged into the main power supply coming straight in from the power company, and I have tasted it all. Well, Ransom is now straight up alarmed. And he starts asking him, you are now in connection with spirit, and you are the vessel to accomplish the will of spirit. What are you willing to do? And what is Weston willing to do for the sake of spirit?
He asked him if he was going to murder him.
And Weston says, absolutely. What else?
Turn England over to the Germans.
Turn England over to the Germans? Lie at a scientific, yep. So basically, if you think about it, in 3 simple questions, he has hit at the heart of who Weston used to be. So Weston was a murderer, but it was never malice. He kills Hioi with a rifle on Malacandra, and he was willing to sacrifice Ransom when he assumed that Ransom was going to be eaten or something by the Sorns. So being complicit in murder for the greater cause is not a new thing, but he would have never said I'm a murderer. He would just would have said, I did what needed to be done. So this one's maybe kind of where he was, but now it's not for the sake of humanity, it's for the sake of spirit. But then selling out England to the Germans, and I don't think Weston was particularly patriotic, but now there seems to be like we're crossing a right and wrong that it should be a little more fundamental to our humanity. And then the last one is a really interesting one about lying in a scientific periodical, because of all the things that all the bad things that Weston was never a liar. If you remember that last book, there were times where he didn't speak the truth, but he never lied. And that was like a point of very strong principle within him. He was a very principled person. It's just those principles were terrible. But a part of that principle, almost like lies were beneath him, he was such a great man. And as a scientist, lying in a scientific journal ought to strike at the very heart of scientific principle, method, integrity, everything. And he, without a thought, oh, absolutely, anything for spirit. And this is such a terrifying thought to Ransom about just how sold Weston is. But there's one last kind of sort of a last ditch hope where he says, wait, Weston, there may be a point of contact. You say it's total commitment. That is, you are giving up yourself. You're not out for your own advantage. No, wait, have a second. This is the point of contact between your morality and mine. We both acknowledge, he's trying to say, your willingness to fully and completely give of yourself. There's a point of nobility and there's a point of self-sacrifice that cannot be truly diabolical, for no good service actually honors Satan. Good service honors God because only God can create good. And he's trying to say, even amidst all this awfulness, you are so close. Don't you realize that what you're saying, all you need to do is take one more step. And that's when everything just... Idiot, says Weston. His voice is almost a howl and he's risen to his feet. Idiot, can't you understand? That now he's tossing out all the concept of self and self-sacrifice. There is no possible distinction in concrete dualism. Oh, there's no conflict between me and the universe. Insofar as I am the conductor of the central forward pressure of the universe, I am it. Do you see, you timid, scruple-mongering fool? I am the universe. I, Weston, am your God, am your devil. I call that force into me completely.
He sold himself. He
Yes.
sold himself. He belongs to.
And everything from this moment on will change. It was bad enough. What's happening in these last dramatic statements? Okay. Spirit is the Oyarsa of Thulkundra. Spirit is the devil. And spirit has been invoked, and he has given himself utterly and completely over, and spirit has taken him. And so this point and what follows is where, I mean, I knew what was coming, and even though I'm not reading ahead, I've read this book before, though it's been several years, and I know where this is going. And I had a little trepidation about how you guys were going to react, because we have some moments in here that follow that you might not have expected. And we've had within this book and the last a lot of crossing over of genres. We've had some science fiction, we've had some suspense, we've had some elements of thriller or action, it's very philosophical. But in what happens over the next couple of pages, I will say we have now taken a step into the realm of horror. Did you get a sense of that?
Yes.
Yes. Yeah.
What happens with the way Weston reacts in the next part is just chilling.
He convulses, his face changes, his voice changes, his body seems to shut down. That awful, trying to help him with the bottle of brandy, and he bites through the bottle.
But here, this is at least where Ransom throws a revolver in the.
Right,
Oh,
right.
Yes.
And there's one brief plea. Ransom. Ransom, for Christ's sake, don't let them.
Yeah.
And you have to wonder if that will be the last time the real Weston ever speaks. His body is present, and we'll see in that next chapter, his voice is used.
Yeah.
How much of that is Weston? For something has now fundamentally changed. And the spirit invoked has answered the call. So there was this frightening realization this is beyond his help, and so yeah, Ransom tosses the gun. So at the very least, that's now out of play. But Weston just seems like completely catatonic in probably the most unnerving way. Unseeing eyes are unnerving to just about everybody. Certainly on a person, but I mean, like even doll's eyes, there's a reason why that creeps kids out. But all he can do as the darkness comes, and remember in Perelandra, when darkness comes, it's like turning off a switch, and it's pitch black because just the way of the rotation and everything else, night comes and boom. So the body of Weston is somewhere out there, but what can I do in the dark? And all he can do is go to sleep and trust. And he does, and he wakes up, and we find ourselves in chapter 8, and where is Weston? So Weston is no longer where he was. He walks around and he tries to figure out what's going on. And now he sees that he's all alone. Now, if some way, somehow, Weston has now left, what hope does Ransom have to do anything about this? And he just basically says, his hopes are now in the king. That either the Green Lady will be protected from Weston will never find her, or the king will intervene, because it seems completely out of my hands now. But of course, it's not quite out of his hands, because there is a way off the island. What's the way off? The fish. One of those riding fish is right there, and it's even kind of nudging it. Boom, boom, boom. Get on, get on, get on, get on. And he has to ride this thing for who knows how long. This is that element of trust that Maleldil has sent me here. And if I fail, that's on me. But I will give my effort and try. And the things that I can control, I will. But the things outside of my control, I will simply trust Maleldil to provide. And he does. And that fish takes him however far away, and it's right to a floating island. And who is on this floating island? Weston and the Green Lady.
Green Lady, yeah. So the fish is to transport them.
Right. Now, so they get there in the dark. Because it seems like it's taken quite a while. But he can hear their voices. He can hear the voice of the Green Lady. And he can hear Weston's voice, although even that seems off. Weston, but not Weston. But maybe the most significant thing is what they're talking about. So what's Weston talking about with the Green Lady?
Teaching her about things
Okay.
that had never happened,
Yes.
and places that had not been, but could be.
Okay. Seems pretty benign. In essence, you could say he is explaining to her the concept of imagination. Imagination's a good thing, right?
And to
Creativity,
Yeah.
thought, well, those are all good things.
even think about things that are forbidden. It's okay just to think
Aha.
about things that are forbidden.
So here's the heart of it. What he's really talking about is the fixed land. And the initial poke has gone nowhere with her. Well, why not stay on the fixed land? Because I've been told not to, and that's all there is. It's very final, it's very firm. So, okay. How about thinking about, that's not staying on the island. You were never told not to think about it, right? Are you getting a picture in your mind? Can you see a tree and a fruit and a snake?
Yeah.
So here, there's a very interesting midrash about that interaction with the serpent and Eve, based off of what Eve says. When asked about the fruit, Eve, and this is not the midrash part of it. This is I'm not quoting, but I'm telling you what it's in chapter 2. Eve says that we are not permitted to touch it. Okay, that's not what God said. What's the difference? God never said anything about touching. What does God actually forbid them from doing? Don't eat it. But when Eve is by herself and interacting with the serpent, she says we're not supposed to touch it. And that's been just kind of a little speculative thought throughout the generations. But there's a real interesting midrash which grew into some of the interpretations and applications of Mosaic law, such as Sabbath keeping. So for a contemporary Jew or in contemporary Israel, the Sabbath has all sorts of extra rules and all sorts of specific things. For instance, when we were in Israel over the Sabbath, one of the things that they do is all elevators in Israel have a Sabbath setting, so you don't press any buttons. The elevator from dawn till dusk, it simply rises and opens automatically at every floor. And it just, why? So an observant Jew does not have to press a button, because pressing a button is work, and thou shalt not work on the Sabbath day. What this initial midrash about Eve's response is, Eve builds in a mental buffer and barrier to prevent her from doing what she shouldn't do. By going extra, she tries to make sure she doesn't accidentally or incidentally do the wrong thing. God says, don't eat it. I interpret that as don't touch it, because if I don't touch it, I can't eat it. But if I touch it, I'm closer to eating it than I was, and maybe too close. You know, like don't touch the apple, but I'm not eating it, but you're kind of lost, right? So it's an interesting thought about, in the Bible itself, Eve has this extra buffer built in for some reason. But here in Perelandra, that's where Weston starts picking at her. Well, what about the things that you weren't told? Like, let's be explicit. If Malelzo said don't stay, you're not staying if you're thinking about it. What's the harm in that? You're not actually doing it. So what's her response to that?
But it would be a strange thing to think about what would never happen.
Right.
In her mind,
It just makes no sense.
Yeah.
Right.
it will never happen, so why bother to think
That's right. That is, what does the number purple taste like? It just doesn't fit. It doesn't make any sense. It's irrational on its face. But Weston has got like an angle to this. And so he keeps dancing around this and sort of keeps pressing. And now he starts talking about, well, maybe these are things you're supposed to learn. And she wants to defer knowledge to the king and to Maleldil. Well, the king is older, and if I'm supposed to learn this, he'll teach me. I trust that. If Maleldil doesn't teach me and I'm supposed to know it, the king will. And if the king doesn't teach me, I'm supposed to, well, maybe I'm not supposed to. And all of this is still in play here. So now Weston's got a new tactic. Well, maybe by you becoming older than the king, you can teach him things and help him grow older. Wouldn't that be a great gift of love? Well, how does that go? She's still not buying it because the king is always older.
Yeah.
Just like Maleldil is always older than us. There's always this hierarchy. There's always this position. There's always this sense of obedience in the manner that there's just a fundamental way that all of these interrelate. Well, then he starts to posit something. He's going to take this thought, but he's going to take it in a positive direction. And he starts talking about generations to come, because she doesn't identify herself as the Green Lady. She identifies herself as what? Mother, the mother. And so there will be future generations of me. And perhaps my joy will be in them growing and them learning, even if it's things that are beyond me. And we can kind of connect with that and sort of understand that. And even she seems to be able to comprehend that one and see some merit to it. Although these are not easy things for her to ponder. So what's so important about Weston wanting her to use her imagination?
She wants you to start thinking about things maybe are forbidden.
He wants her to think about things that are maybe forbidden. If I can get you to think about anything, well, then you can think about all sorts of things. And some of those things, like these forbidden things, the fruit of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. What's the trump card that the serpent plays to convince Eve to do it?
You will be like God.
You will be like God. He's jealous. He doesn't want you to be like him. But if you know the difference between good and evil, you will be like God.
And when Weston does the same thing, with the top of page 91, they do not need to wait for him to tell them what's good, but know it for themselves as he does. They are, as it were, little Maleldils.
Aha.
So he's doing the same thing.
And he is trying his hardest to make that sound not only plausible, but defensible. Don't you want to know the good? Well, this is how. You can know it for yourself. You don't have to be trained like you train the animals. You don't have to be told like you tell the fish to come get you. You mature and you grow and you become like Maleldil. Isn't that your hope? And this is the temptation of the Green Lady. She would become older, not for her own sake,
For her children.
but for her children, for her king, and for her God. And she begins to think about some of the possibilities, and yet all of those possibilities remain proper and pure and holy and good. Weston has failed. And even Ransom feels this imperceptible sense of triumph all around him, as though the planet itself had won a victory. But I'll say, look at the book. We're not done. And I will suggest that Weston has accomplished getting the Green Lady old enough to start using her imagination that she didn't do before. Imagination, which is a gift. God, who is himself creative, has given us the privilege and blessing of reflecting that creativity. How we use it becomes enormously important. He has gotten her to unlock a door. The door itself and what's behind it is good, but a door has been unlocked. And even though she didn't walk through and do something bad,
She's got an
That's
end.
it.
there's an end. Something has developed inside of her. And even though there seems to be triumph and victory, even all the chapters left should tell us it's not complete yet.
Yes.
And just, it is often at our point of feeling greatest triumph that we are most at risk. So this is how 8 concludes. She has disengaged. I'm going to go to sleep now, or I've had enough. And again, this seems to be a victory. I will say a victory for the sake of Perelandra, but I will also suggest that the ground has also shifted just a little. And Weston is not done yet. Maybe Weston's just getting started. Anything else?
I think it's interesting how Weston kept invoking the Melville in gradually stronger terms. First he said, he was talking about fixed land. He said, well, where I come from, Melville doesn't forbid us to be on fixed land.
That's right.
Because we would be lonesome. And then he said something later about the king, who obviously was on a different floating island. Well, people in my place would be very sad if we were separated.
Right.
And just one thing after another.
That's right.
And then the coup de grace, of course, was we all become little Melvilles.
Yep. It's just little tick, 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 until something weakens enough to break through. And there's there is a methodical, long game nature to this, where he doesn't seem particularly invested in any one direction. And if it gets cut off, he just sort of veers a little bit. But it's just always pressing, always touching, always pushing, just a little, just a little, just a little, again and again and again. And again, though she has only received the good, there's more to come. And now, I think there is something that is now vulnerable. Or if she can imagine the future good, then she can imagine other things as well. And so far, it seems to be a choice. But once things are a choice, there's now a risk. Anything else?
Well, there's one sentence that impressed me, and it's on page 92. When the man is getting ready to go to sleep, and it's as if he's hearing music within himself, because he feels that at least they've gotten hold of this little.
Yes.
book. And it says it was like being present from the morning star standing together for his creation.
That's right.
And that one sentence struck me because
Yeah, it's a beautiful line.
Yeah.
It was like being present when the morning stars sing together. It was as if Perelandra had that moment been created, and perhaps in some sense it had.
It's changing.
So it is developing and it's firming and forming. And that first important step was positive. But now with movement, there comes the risk of slipping and falling. So it's not done yet. The first step was taken and the first step remained good and true. But now what's next? All right, so that would be 9 and 10 for next time. Are we all right with 2 chapters again?
Yeah.
Okay, well, that's what we'll do. Okay,
See you later.
thanks, Sam.
Bye. Thank you.